You have also been an advocate regarding the gas plant district.
Yes, the gas plant is one of those examples of black township and black excellence that was overrun by whites and by government in the interest of improvement and urban renewal. That's a lie that's being told to raise black communities to the ground that was self-sufficient, self-supporting, had their own economics, had their own religion, had their schools and all of those things because A, people wanted the land, and B, because there's a natural prejudice against black people being independent and self-sufficient. And as much as the narrative said that black people are lazy and that they want handouts, the truth of the matter is that every example of black excellence, whether it's Tulsa, Rosewood, Seneca Village in New York, and all around the country, whenever there have been a black township that demonstrated black excellence and black ability to stand for ourselves and support ourselves, it has gone under attack and ultimately been demolished. And the gas plant is just one example. I wasn't raised there, but I had enough knowledge of it to see what had happened, to see that this land was taken under false pretenses, that a dome was placed that it promised jobs and opportunity, which was a lie, it never happened, and that once we had a leadership, black leadership in the mayor's position, this was the chance, and he ran on the premise of bringing back and keeping promises that were made 40 years ago. And instead, they took those 86 acres and wanted to sell it to the Rays, who were not developers. They were baseball millionaires, for $160 million when it was worth more than $500 million. They were able to raise $300 million, along with the county $300 million, to help these billionaires build a $1.3 billion stadium. I have to admit that I prayed that God would do something supernatural to stop that deal in its tracks. The mayor and others were headstrong. They wanted to ram that down this community's throats, and they did. But when God stepped in and ripped the roof off that building, and a couple of other scenarios developed that Rays felt like they were not getting their way, they backed out. And it's so unfortunate because we had developers, we had Sugar Hill and others who wanted to restore that community, make it a place where black people could live, to restore what had been taken, cemetery that had been paved over. And if the Rays wanted to stay, to give them property, but they would have to share their profits, they would have to benefit the city rather than the city being totally beneficial toward them. The deal that was on the table would have gave them 5 years tax-free. They would have owned that property outright, and they brought in their own Hines Group, which is a developer, to take that property and to use it for their benefit, a 30-year build out. And we know billionaires don't wait 30 years to collect their money. So literally that property, that 86 acres outside of what they were going to use for their $1.3 billion playpen, would have been flipped or put in the hands of subcontractors to build out, while the big boys basically took money off the top. I'm so thankful that that fell through. And I think the mayor, I think everybody that was part of that should be ashamed of themselves, especially if they're aware of how that property was taken and how it came about, and that they had an opportunity to restore it, to restore fairness. They ran on that premise and they lied, and they changed their stripes once they got into a position to do something about it. I thank God that it fell through.
That is very sentimental property. There are still bodies and a graveyard on that property that was next to a church that is the foundation of an aspect of the community.
Absolutely. And I believe that the ancestors were enraged. I believe there was no other place in this country that you ever had a white cemetery, a Jewish cemetery, and even an Indian burial ground that has been overlooked and paved under. That's the kind of disdain and disrespect they hold for African Americans and what we consider to be sacred and dear to us. Those plots were purchased. Whatever the price was, irrelevant. They were purchased. They were privately owned plots where those people's family were buried. They should have been compensated, and those graves should have been exhumed and moved rather than paved over. That's one of the highest forms of disrespect, both on a natural and spiritual level. And again, I thank God that he intervened, and I pray that he'll continue to intervene in a mighty way until they do what's right by this community before it becomes Seneca under the Central Park in New York and some of the other cities that are underwater now.
Oscarville, Georgia.
Lake Lanier, it's on top of a black community. Now people are skiing and playing around on top of it like they don't know, and they probably don't know what originally existed there because they bulldozed it, they dug a man-made lake, and now they have people enjoying that lake, and it's all on top of the oppression of African Americans who demonstrated that we can do for ourselves. If you leave us the hell alone, our cream will rise to the top. We are responsible for probably every major patent that exists in America that makes America's life more easy. And here we are being bulldozed over, and then the narrative being that we are not willing to do for ourselves, or they're killing each other off, which is such a small percentage of the crime rate, but it's used to ignore the greatness and to take away the opportunities that we have to redevelop, to reinvigorate, and to rename ourselves in the face of all the racism that has been and continues to be prevalent in America.
Do you think now that it was God's intervention that you did not get the Congress seat, do you think that you're able to do more from the outside than you would have been able to do from the inside? Or what do you think?
I think that what God had to do with it was to expose the hypocrisy and the racism of the Democrats, basically. The Democrats are still divided. They take advantage of black people just like the few black conservatives that have been taken advantage of by the Republican Party. They use us if they can to acquire votes from our people, and that's the extent of it. You're no better than the number of votes that you can get. That part I believe that God used to expose it. But at that time and at that age, I believe fully that I would have been very effective in Congress, any other place that God saw fit for me to serve in a public capacity. Whether or not that time has come, we don't know. Whether it's God's will that I'm where I'm at, I'm certain of that, at least for this season. But in terms of what I would have been able to accomplish in those arenas, I don't think that God prevented that. I think God had a better and a bigger purpose, which was to expose the roots of racism and exclusion that exists in every so-called political party, and that we're only an instrument to get black votes, no more, no less.
There is a famous entertainer that was actually about to put together a political party that in and of itself would have rivaled the Democrat and the Republican Party. What do you think about Black Americans, American Indians who happen to be black, and those that are freedmen, American descendants of slaves,